أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والنجم إذا هوى ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى وما ينطق عن الهوى إن هو إلا وحي يوحى. صلوات عليه. Tonight we are gathered for commemoration of the shahadat of our eighth Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa Riza alayhi salatu wassalam. And the theme that I would like to discuss is continuation of what I had started last night. And inshallah we'll connect that to the example of the eighth Imam towards the end. But in the majlis last night, we looked at the two different perceptions of the Prophet of Islam in the school of the Ahlul Bayt and the school of the Sahaba. The perception among the majority of Muslims about the Prophet is that, yes, he was a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can divide his life into official capacity and personal capacity. Wherever he is saying something or doing something in his official capacity as a Rasul and a Nabi, then that's binding upon us. We have to follow it. But whatever he says on a personal level or does on a personal level, it's not binding. We can choose to ignore that. From the Shi'i point of view, this is not acceptable. We believe the Prophet to be ma'soom in the absolute sense. Whatever he says, whatever he does, whether he is happy at that time, whether he is angry at that time, in every moment of his life, he is a Nabi and a Rasul. Because if you look at it, the Quran says very clearly, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. Muhammad is nothing but a Rasul. If you look at these ayat that are recited earlier from Surah An-Najm, even what he said, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى, he does not speak. The word nutq means to utter something. And the Quran says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَى, he doesn't say anything out of his own personal desire. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَى. Ask the scholars who are here and they'll tell you that there is double emphasis in the words used here. In huwa. Literally it means it is nothing. Illa means whatever he is saying, it is nothing but wahyun yuha. But the inspiration and revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the words in huwa illa, whatever he says is nothing but wahy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shows that whether he is presenting the Quran to us or he is using his own words to convey a message, both are based on the inspiration and ilham and wahy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat alayhi. This difference in the perception about the Prophet existed, as I said last night, during the time of the Prophet. We saw in that incident of the Thursday, the last Thursday of his life, where Abdullah ibn Abbas describes it, the sorrow of the Thursday, because of what happened. And we looked at Sahih Bukhari. Let me just summarize what we had discussed. And we tried to even put that on the slide form before we continue the narration from Sahih Bukhari. Salawat pढ़ना एक बार और. The first thing to keep in mind is that this event of the Thursday that Bukhari mentions is written this 6 different places in Sahih Bukhari, 6 different chapters. And in all 6 cases, the Rawi is the same person. The narrator is one, Abdullah ibn Abbas, the cousin of the Prophet, a very prominent Sahabi known as Hibrul Ummah. The Sunnis actually have given him this title. Hibr means ink. Hibrul Ummah, he is the ink of the Ummah because of his knowledge. And so he is the narrator. And it's interestingly, as I explained to you, that when we look at the narration, right in the beginning, what did the Prophet ask in that gathering, where the companions had come to visit him when he was not feeling well on that Thursday? The request of the Prophet was very clear. Bring a paper to me so that I can dictate or write something. لا تضل بعده or لن تضل بعده. You will never go astray after it. And these words are very similar to the words used by the Prophet whenever he talked about Saqalain, that I'm leaving the Quran and the family as a source of guidance. لا تضل بعده. As long as you hold on to them, you will not go astray. What was the response? According to Bukhari, in the 6 places that he narrates it, he gives us 2 versions. 3 versions say one thing, and the 3 other versions say something else. As far as the opposition is concerned, the first response, he says, or the 3 versions, is individuals he doesn't name. قالوا, they said, حجر Rasulullah. Nawzu billah, Rasul is not talking in the right way. He is, Nawzu billah, talking nonsense. He is delirious in his speech. And then we have 3 other, versions out of those 6, where he gives the name, that who is the one who opposed this request of the Prophet. And the name is Umar. There, of course, the words are now more polite, palatable, that غَلَبَ عَلَيْهِ الْوَجْهِ, pain has overcome the Prophet. You have the Quran with you. حَسْبُنَا كِتَابَ اللَّهِ. The book of Allah is sufficient. It's important to note the wordings. The Prophet is asking for something, and there are individuals in that room. And this fellow is responding to the Prophet, but doesn't talk to the Prophet directly. He says, he is overcome with pain. You have the Quran. The Quran is sufficient for us. So even the talk is not directly to the Prophet. He is basically trying to convince the people who were there. And according to the narration of Bukhari, the response of the Prophet was very clear. In the 3 versions where Nawzu billah, the sanity of the Prophet is being questioned, the Prophet was very angry. The words used there is basically Zaruni, Da'uni, leave me alone. I am in a better state than what you are describing about me. When it comes to the other 3 versions where the words of Umar have been mentioned, the response of the Prophet is, Qumu anni, get out of here. It is not appropriate for you to dispute in the presence of Rasulullah. This is what we saw last night. And as far as the reaction is concerned, Bukhari says there was division in the room. There were some, and he mentions Ahlul Bayt in 2 of the 4 cases, that they were saying, listen to what the Prophet is saying, fulfill his wish and desire. Whereas others were saying the same words that Umar had mentioned. And so the dispute is already there. And this is where a question comes up before I even go to the what happened afterwards. The question comes up, people say, well, why didn't the Ahlul Bayt present the paper and pen to the Prophet at that time? Although there was dispute, there were two groups in there. But there were Ahlul Bayt on the side of saying the Prophet wants to write something, give him the tools, or let him dictate and you write it down. Remember yesterday I talked about it in detail before when we came to this event, that the Prophet had fulfilled his duty of clarifying the issue of succession from day one. From Da'wat Zul Ashira all the way to Ghadir. In Ghadir, the issues were very clearly mentioned, because remember the wordings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, إِن لَمْ تَفْعَلْ فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَةً. O Muhammad, if you do not convey this message, then it will be as if you had not fulfilled the message at all. And so in Ghadir, Rasulullah made it very clear, and Allah was pleased with it. He sent down the ayat of Ikmal, Al-Yawm Akmaltu Lakum Dinakum. Today I have perfected your religion and completed your religion for you. So Rasulullah had already fulfilled his duty. He didn't have to do any more talking about succession, vilayat and imamat of Ali after the day of Ghadir. So what was he doing there on that day, on Thursday? The Prophet wanted to do something extra out of his own sense of mercy as a father of ummah. He wanted to basically seek one more way of putting this in a written form, as a written will. But so the first thing is that this was not wajib, number one. He had already done his duty.